Welcome everyone to this policy roundtable on inclusive AI for development. And in particular, we are celebrating the new technology and innovation report of UNCTAD 2025, which is on this theme. And we have the lead author of the report joining us to share with us the highlights. Let me just make a couple of comments to get started. I believe that this is a very timely report. Jackie, congratulations. And, very timely in the sense that all of us are practically every day, reading about this new disruptive technology revolution unfolding before us. Uh, Sometimes it was called in Industrial Revolution 4.0, IR 4.0, which had a collection of several of the new disruptive technologies. But I think among all of those, AI, the artificial intelligence, is really, going with full force, and you see a lot of positive, applications and negative consequences of that surfacing. Perhaps the negative news is much more visible in the media, such as the job losses in the IT companies. Microsoft was first to announce, shedding several thousand jobs. Then in India, TCS, the front-running or the leading ICT software company, has recently shed or announced shedding several thousands of jobs. So there are a lot of concerns in people's mind whether this new artificial intelligence revolution is going to do something good or only these kind of negative consequences. Of course, as a general purpose technology or the technology revolution, it has applications across all different sectors, including agriculture, including manufacturing, including several services like legal or medical or whichever you name it. So there are very important productivity enhancing applications of this technology, which are finding their application, and every practically every profession is affected from the use of AI in their work. But the concern of developing countries like India is whether it will lead to too many losses of jobs. And if that is going to be the consequence or important implication, then how do we sort of take care or protect our interests? And so the issue about development is how we can make the artificial intelligence as a new core technology more inclusive between countries and within countries. So the marginalized groups within the country are not affected adversely. The marginalized countries or the countries on the periphery of the global economic order, like developing and least developed countries, are also able to make use of it and are not only counting the job losses. So that is the focus of this report, and that is why I said it is very timely, and it is for all of us to mull over what this new technology is about, how to make best use of it, and not be left behind, and also are able to take care of some of the adverse or negative consequences. So I think this is the focus of this report. So I feel is the most timely discussion. And we are very happy to have you with us, Jackie, to share the highlights of this report. But I am also very pleased that we have managed to get uh, three very senior and among the most knowledgeable experts of the theme under discussion today to join you for taking the discussion forward and responding to some of the points raised in the report. And these three experts, I'm very pleased to have with us today include Dr. Umarani at the ILO, then Professor Rajat Kathuria at Shiv Nadar University, and Professor Sunil Mani at Center for Development Studies in Trivandrum. I will, introduce them a bit more little later when I invite them. But before that, I want to turn over to you, Jackie, to share your highlights of the report with all of us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Nagesh, for having me to present the major findings and recommendation of the report. Let me share my screen first. Okay, so now you should be in presentation mode, right? Okay, cool. Thank you. So as Nagesh has kindly introduced and provide a background, this report look at inclusive AI for development. And the purpose of the report is to support policymakers to navigate this very complex and rapidly developing AI landscape, and also to help them design responsive policy to seize this AI benefit and also minimize potential risks. So this is the purpose and the background of this report. And the report is structured in 5 chapters. To begin with, I will give an overview of the AI landscape. Then I will look into the impact of AI on productivity and workforce. Here, I would like to thank Uma for her contribution on this chapter on the impact of AI on workforce. And after that, I will give an assessment and a framework on how we can assess the preparedness of country in adopting and also developing AI. And then that would be followed by different AI policy with examples from different countries. And then finally, I will talk about AI collaboration at the international level. So this is the structure of the report and also what I will cover in this presentation. And they are closely related to SDG 8, 9, and 17. So to begin with, the first point that I would like to make is that AI show very high market potential. From about 190 billion, it will jump by 25 times to up to about 4.8 trillion by 2033. To give a sense of this market size, that would be about 4 times the smartphone market we will have by 2033. And AI will also be the technology that has the largest market share by then, outpacing Internet of Things, blockchain, electric vehicle, and other frontier technology. So from this, it is very clear that we have a significant market potential for AI, and that's why we have a lot of attention on this subject. But on the other hand, we should be aware of the significant AI divide, and that is a very important issue that we need to talk about inclusive AI for development. Because on the left-hand side, if you can see the market share in graphics processing unit, GPU, that is a critical component for AI training. Actually, NVIDIA, a US company, account for 90% of this market share. And for advanced semiconductors, that was produced by a Taiwan company called TSMC. So in terms of AI hardware, we can see a very significant concentration there. And on the software side, on the right-hand side, you can also see Amazon, Microsoft, and Google They have two-thirds of the global cloud market. And in fact, all these five companies that I just mentioned, they are the company with the largest market capitalization in the world. And for NVIDIA and Microsoft specifically, they just passed the 4 trillion market cap. And to give a sense of how big this market is, that would be even bigger than the GDP of India or the whole African continent. So we can see a significant market concentration in this multinational company. But this extend beyond the AI hardware and software. If we look into the R&D investment, the knowledge production, the talent, so on and so forth, we can see this AI divide across country and also a significant divide between large and small companies. And to give another figure, China and US together contribute to around one-third of the global publication in AI over the past 2 decades, and also account for more than two-thirds of the AI patents. So this kind of concentration in a number of countries and a handful of companies is something that warrant our attention to have some effective policy to make sure that AI could actually benefit all, not just a few. And to provide a better analytical framework on how we look into this inclusive AI, we identified three major drivers of AI. They are infrastructure, data, and skill. Infrastructure covers not only the basic electricity or connectivity, but more sophisticated data center and also computing resources that is crucial for AI. And in terms of data, we see a very rapid increase in terms of the data with a larger variety and quality data that is also key for AI training. And the last part on skills would be the sophisticated AI model to train the data to provide different application. And within these three pillars, we can see a significant synergy. For example, with a good infrastructure that can help us optimize the data. And the data could also help us to support different model training and better use of the infrastructure. So we have this interplay of the three drivers, and that accelerate the whole AI adoption and development. And this three major driver would be the analytical framework that we have in this model to look at the preparedness of country, to look at the appropriate policy response, and also at the international level, what kind of global collaboration we need along these three pillars. And before I talk about the impact of I would like to highlight the transformative power of AI. If we go from the bottom, from Industrial 1.0, we can see that the machine and also steam power give us the power that extend beyond human labor. And then in Industrial 2.0, that was actually about the expand of scale when we have mass production and electric power. If we move up, Industry 3.0 involve the innovation of computers, electronics, and automated production. And that gives us speed that accelerate whole production process. And Industry 4.0 nowadays we are ascending actually combine the cyber and physical system. So through Internet of Things, we can increase this data and connectivity. And some study may say that AI sparks the emergence of Industry 5.0. That would be adding a very different layer of intelligence to human-robot collaboration, or we may call co-pilot. And this is exactly the distinctive features of AI, how it differs from the previous industrial revolution and previous technology. That is its capacity in providing data analytics, natural language processing, or even generating content and with contextual adaptation. So this intelligence is what makes AI unique, and also it is emerging as a general purpose technology that can augment different technology. For example, in terms of Internet of Things, AI can empower this device to make autonomous action. And it can also connect with 5G, blockchain, 3D printing, etc., etc. So this is the transformative power of AI and its uniqueness in terms of the capacity that it offers compared to previous technology. And with that, I would like to highlight the employment impact that was highlighted by Nagesh. This is a study conducted by IMF, which estimate the exposure of AI in terms of different countries. On the left-hand side, you can see the light blue bar would be the exposure to AI augmentation. That is how AI may help human labor to complement the skill. And the dark blue one is the exposure to automation. That is the potential of AI replacing the human labor. And you can see that for advanced economies, the automation exposure or that potential is the highest. About one third of the workers estimate to be replaced by AI. And that is because advanced economy, they have more quantitative tasks. So this is exactly what AI can do compared to previous technology. And that's why they have a higher automation exposure to AI. But then for low-income country, they have still a lot of manufacturing work or agriculture workers. So the exposure to automation is much smaller. What I want to highlight is the right-hand side in terms of Gen AI exposure. Because Gen AI is very unique in the sense that it can create new contents, be it with text, video, or even programs. So this capacity can have a high potential of complementing human productivity. And you can see that for low income, middle income, or high income, that potential is much larger than the automation potential. So this is a very positive sign that we can see from the Gen AI exposure, how it can complement human labor and make us more productive without replacing too much of the workforce. And at a closer look at the micro level study, we can see Gen AI can actually impact a lot of different sectors and type of work. For example, in terms of call center, in terms of writing tasks, or even programming tasks. Gen AI show a very significant positive effect on all these tasks. But what I want to emphasize here is that more of the current literature focus on developed country because they have more firm level data to support this analysis. And it is still uncertain how this impact may emerge in developing countries and more evidence to be seen to how AI or Gen AI may affect the whole working process. But this is a snapshot of a summary of the potential impact that we can find from the current literature. And to summarize, there are four channels where AI could impact productivity and workforce. The top two ones are those that I have already mentioned. That would be substituting human labor, that is the automation part. And the second one would be um, uh, uh, augmenting the human labor so it can assist them to make better decisions and help with their job. But there are also two other channels. One is to further deepen the current automation to make it more efficient, like with the IoT, how AI could help them to make better decisions with the automation. And the last one is creating new jobs. For example, AI create jobs in data labeling and also content moderation. Unfortunately, those are not very meaningful job to say. And in fact, in some study in India and Kenya, for example, we can observe a lot of highly educated workers actually dedicate with this rather lower skill task of data modeling, data labeling. So this is not a very healthy situation that we observe right now in terms of creating new and meaningful jobs. And rather, it may actually de-skill the highly educated workers. So this is one potential risk that we should be looking into. And from all these four channels, I would say the left-hand side, the substituting human labor and the automation is actually the trend of the previous technological progress or industrial revolution in general. Because more or less, company actually owns the latest technology, and they tend to replace the workers with the latest technology automation. So that process of technological development actually favor capital more than human labor. And it also undermines the competitive advantage of developing country of cheap labor costs. And this is not something that we would like to see the trend to be continued. That's why the first recommendation we have here is to have a worker-centric approach in terms of AI adoption that focus on the right-hand side, the augmenting power and the creating of new jobs. And that could be done through three major areas of actions. The first one is to empower the workforce. That goes from the basic digital literacy to also to help those affected by AI to reskill them, and for the others to upskill them so they can have more meaningful and also more productive kind of jobs in the whole AI life cycles. So this is the empowering task. And the second one is to engage workers in the design and implementation of AI. So they are not left behind and then wait until the senior management say you should go use whatever tools for their job. So they should be involved in the co-designing and also implementation process so they can own that AI tools and make sure that it contribute to their work in a positive way, not really just replacing them. And the last one is, of course, to foster the development of human-centric AI solution, not AI solution that easily automate or replace worker. And government has a strong role in this regard. It can do through strategic procurement, target R&D funding, and also different initiatives to steer the private sector or academic to develop solution that is more human-centric that really benefit the workers in general. So this is the first recommendation that I will highlight from this report on how we can leverage AI to favor workers, but not just to replace them. And moving forward, I would like to share some examples of successful AI adoption in developing countries. On the left-hand side, there is an example on application that can help farmers to see whether there is any suspected infection on banana plant. And that AI application is quite popular in East Africa and Asia in general. And it also offers offline version where the farmers can just take a photo and then put it in the apps, and then it can easily give the diagnostic and also some guideline on how to treat that banana plant to manage it better. So this is one very handy example how AI was successfully adopted in agriculture setting. And then on the right-hand side is about healthcare use case. There was a research team in Nigeria who developed this application that can identify abnormalities in terms of the infant crimes. So when it record the infant crimes, it can identify whether it has some kind of breathing problem or any complication after it was born. So this app was further developed into an app that can act like a Google Translate that can help the parents to understand what different type of cries represent the needs of the baby. Like be it needs some food, or it may want to change the curve or something other like that. So these are two very brief example on AI adoption in developed countries, and there are more in the report, which I encourage to have a look in terms of the agriculture, manufacturing, and healthcare application. And to summarize the takeaway from all this case study, there are four ways that we can promote AI adoption. The first one is to design the AI solution around locally available digital infrastructure. The example that I made, the offline version actually help bypass the issue of connectivity, internet connection in many developing countries. So this is one, how to design the AI solution based on the available local infrastructure. The second one is to use the AI models and algorithm to utilize the local data that was not available before. So that could help us to leverage the local solution based on those data, the local context. And then the third one is about skills, that we should lower the skill barrier. So with very simple and user-friendly interface, we don't need to have a very high barrier, and farmers or some low-skill workers can easily use this technology for their work. And the last one is to build international partnership. And that is very important because for many of this AI adoption example, they are more or less at the pilot stage. So to scale them up, we need this kind of partnership to have a better implementation. And one interesting example is in the case in East Africa, because Swahili is a local language there. But for example, Rwanda is too small to utilize this AI model to train Swahili in terms of the AI application. But as a regional group, the East African, they use this common language and they can put this data together to develop AI model. So this kind of collaboration and partnership is key for us to accelerate the adoption of AI in different contexts. And next, I will move on to the questions of readiness, whether countries are prepared to leverage all this AI benefit that I discussed in the previous example. And UNCTAD published this Frontier Technology Readiness Index every 2 years along with the report. And you can see the top rankings are dominated by mostly developed countries. There are also some developing countries having quite good rankings. For example, India ranked 46 in the latest index, and it increased by more than 12 position compared to the previous ranking. And especially in terms of R&D and industry, India has a very good performance. And to look at it in a different way, we can plot this index score against GDP per capita. And you can see some outperformers here. For example, India really stand out. That means with the same GDP per capita, it has the highest preparedness in this frontier technology. And among all these outperformers, a very common feature is the strong capacity in R&D and also industry. So this is a very good sign of how developed countries may have the potential for adopting frontier technology in general from this analysis of the Frontier Technology Index. And to offer a more comprehensive analysis in terms of AI, actually, we have prepared another analytical framework that look at the AI adoption capacity and AI development capacity. So it categorized country into four groups. For those who are high with high adoption and development, they are obviously the leaders. If they are only high in adoption but low development, they are considered as practitioners. And also for the others, like laggers and creators. So this provide a framework for us to categorize and also identify the relative strength and weakness of countries and help them to design a catch-up strategy. For example, from laggers to practitioner and then to leaders. And we do this analysis based on the three drivers or the leverage point that I discussed, that is infrastructure, data, and skill. And from this graph, I just take the example of the skill preparedness. On the y-axis, I have the working age population with advanced degree as a proxy of AI adoption capacity. And then on the x-axis, I have the developers on GitHub, very popular open platform in terms of the working age population. So that proxy the AI development capacity. And then it categorize country into four different grouping. And you can see the blue dots represent developed countries, and they are mostly leaders in terms of this skill preparedness. And for the orange dots, they are developing countries, and most of them are either practitioner or the laggards. And then the purple one are the LDC, the least developed countries, and they are mostly lagging behind. So this provide a very keen and easy snapshot of how well different countries are prepared in the terms of the world benchmark, with the dotted line representing the average in these two indicators. And we can see India actually fall into the bottom left quadrant. But I should emphasize that this indicator is not comprehensive enough, because this is just a relative indicator that look at the proportion in terms of the working age population. And to supplement this analysis, we should also look at the absolute number. For example, in terms of skill, we can actually see India has a very large critical mass of GitHub developers. Actually, the second in the world, with about 12 or 13 million GitHub developers in 2023. And another table that show the growth, actually India also has a very high growth rate in terms of the increase in these developers. So from this supplement indicators, I would like to emphasize that the size and also the growth rate also matter, not only just the relative indicators, but also whether a country have a critical mass is key for adopting and also developing AI. And this significant number of developers is partly thanks to the government effort in developing AI Center of Excellence, and also with the India AI mission that cultivate the ecosystem for AI development in general. So with that, I would like to shift on to the importance of AI policy. And to give a very brief background, this graph so that the share of service export is actually increasing over the past few decades as a percentage of world trade export. And this is important because it tells us the traditional export-oriented manufacturing growth model may not be that useful nowadays, because the whole economic structure shift to this knowledge-intensive sector, especially with the rise of different technology and AI. So this is a very important background that we should bear in mind. And actually, we also see shift in terms of industrial policy to innovation policy. And that is exactly what we emphasize in terms of the OPA policy response that should work on this knowledge intensive and service sectors. And if we look at the number of countries with this national AI strategy, unfortunately, developing country and also LDC, not many of them have a national AI strategy, and most of them are actually coming from developed country. So again, we can see a divide here behind the AI policy. So not just on the infrastructure, data, and skill preparedness level, but also the policy response from developing country are still lacking. And that is a lot of work that we should focus on this end to see how we can launch a local strategy that fit the national development goals. And with this this chapter goes with a number of case study, and I would like to first mention the overarching approach by three different economies: China, EU, and the USA. And that represent three different approach in terms of AI development. China has a stronger state influence in terms of how they want to shape the AI development, but European Union focus more on the human right perspective that highlight customer and also the citizen protection. And on the contrary, the USA favor the private company to lead this AI development. Of course, with the new administration, this is now changing. But overall, these three economies represent three quite different approach in how they steer AI development. And developing countries should find an approach that really align with their socio-economic situation and to guide AI development. And here we provide different case study according to the infrastructure, data, and skill, but also according to the AI adoption and development. For example, in terms of infrastructure, we can see some basic connectivity project in Brazil and Cote d'Ivoire that facilitate AI adoption. But we can also see in Japan and Korea, they focus more on the high performance computing infrastructure or semiconductor for the AI development. And then in terms of data, we can see some project that promote the sharing of open data in Chile and Germany, but also in India about how we should have the ethical guideline on using AI in biomedical research. And for the development perspective, we can see some test environment like the sandbox used in Colombia and also some new intellectual property policy in Singapore. And then in terms of skills, we have some across the board basic digital literacy program in the Philippines and Spain, but also more targeted programming or AI research capacity building in Ghana and Nigeria. So I won't go into the details of this example, but just to present an overview of how different countries are working on the adoption and development of AI along this infrastructure, data, and skills. And to host the presentation, I will touch on the international collaboration part. And to highlight the overall landscape, we can still see a very fermented international governance in terms of the AI regime. And this figure showed the seven major international AI governance initiatives, and the light blue share actually says that over 118 countries, mainly from the global south, they are not involved in any of this initiative, and only the G7 are involved in all these major initiatives. So apart from the AI divide that I mentioned in terms of hardware, software, R&D, talent, and knowledge generation, to the lack of policy, and now with this lack of representation in global AI governance. So this is the issue that we need to tackle to ensure inclusive AI for development. And in that regard, the UN has done a lot to promote this governance or inclusive development from different multi-stakeholder platforms to the ethical standard that was done by UNESCO on the ethics of AI. And then last year, we have two new global resolutions and also the Pact for the Future that is going to establish an independent scientific panel on AI and also a global dialogue on AI governance. And it also mandate the Commission on Science and Technology for Development to set up a working group on data governance. So this is a snapshot of the recent development the UN is taking in terms of AI. And I would like to conclude by making four suggestions on how we can strengthen global collaboration. And I will discuss one by one in detail. The first one is in terms of AI accountability. Because nowadays we see a lot of principles on how AI should be used, like responsible, transparency, etc. But we are still lacking a mechanism that can put this into practice. And a very good reference that we could take is from the ESG reporting framework. That is the environmental, social, and governance framework. And an AI equivalent could be made to ensure this accountability. What I means is that, first of all, we should have an impact assessment on how AI could impact different stakeholders throughout the AI life cycle, and we should make it public. So, for example, a company should analyze how AI may impact the staff, the environment, or the whole supply chain in terms of their business. And moreover, it should also make public the decision-making process because AI usually uh, was campaigned as a black box that lacked this grammatic transparency. So how the thinking process or this decision-making process should be made transparent, and also with the data use and risk management. So with this public disclosure, we can help the company accountable. And from the ESG experience, that can go from a certification system from voluntary to mandatory reporting when we have a more mature and a standardized approach. And currently, actually, many stock exchange require all the listed company to report not only the financial situation, but also the ESG perspective. And a similar way could be applied to AI disclosure. And lastly, of course, is the enforcement to make sure that this compliance is made in terms of the accountability framework. So this is one. And the second one is on the infrastructure part. And I think India has done a lot on this digital public infrastructure. And for AI specifically, what it means is to have the governments investing in the physical infrastructure that goes from data center to high performing computing hardware. And then through a cloud platform, it can be distributed easily to different stakeholders within the ecosystem. And because most of this infrastructure are on the hand of private sector, so public-private partnership is really key to accelerate this development. And at the regional or global level, what we advocate is a CERN model for AI. CERN is the largest particle physics laboratory based in Geneva, and that model is a very useful one that illustrate how countries can pool resources to build an infrastructure for public good. And we think that a similar model for AI could provide equitable and accessible infrastructure to all the developing countries and different stakeholders. So this is our second recommendation on having a shared digital public infrastructure for AI. And the fourth one is about promoting open info innovation. As we know, open innovation is taking a lot of momentum and recognition since COVID. For example, the open data that we use during COVID time to facilitate the research work on developing a vaccine is a very prominent example. And from the software side, we can also identify some example like Linux or Android that use open source. And with this open innovation framework, there are lots of useful materials nowadays on AI. But what is missing is connected and also harmonized base that we can make sure that they share the same quality and standard. And that is something the international community can do. And in fact, the G20 last year under the Brazilian presidency, they proposed a global open innovation strategy, which UNCTAD also contribute to that drafting. And this kind of global strategy on open innovation is something we need for AI to make sure that we have the knowledge and resources democratized and also enable co-development and co-design of this AI solution. And finally, on the capacity building side, there are four key actions. The first one is, of course, knowledge sharing to exchange the best practice through different platforms. And the second one is technology transfer, which UNCTAD support a lot of this technical and assistant and project between countries. And the third one is uh, wider scope of capacity building from training the trainers, training the policymaker to having some target educational program that enable workers, policymakers, and different stakeholders to make better use of AI. And what I would like to highlight is the last one on self-serve collaboration, because that is really how we can accelerate the AI development and adoption. Because for many developing countries, they share very similar challenges. And through this collaboration, they can co-design solutions that can address their common problems. And we can also leverage existing effort to accelerate this collaboration. For example, through trade agreement, we can include provision on AI technology and service exchange. And also we can leverage ASEAN or the African Union for designing some coherent policy action on AI. And with the building of a regional excellence and a thematic approach on AI, I think that proved to be a very successful way of having this better self-self cooperation. So I would like to close here with this four recommendation, and I would also like to emphasize that uh, the potential that AI present is enormous, but also the AI DeFi is very significant. And only through very targeted and dedicated national and international effort, we can ensure that AI benefit all, but not leaving the uh, 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 developing countries or the marginal community further behind. So I thank you for your attention and I look forward to further discussion with all the experts. Thank you very much.
Very much indeed, Jackie, for a very comprehensive presentation, sharing the highlights of this very timely report with all of us. And I think it is very clear that this technology, as a key general purpose major technology, is going to affect uh, all walks of life. And you had some interesting examples how a baby cry can be also interpreted, you know, through AI, and the concerns about concentration and domination by some, and the marginalized countries becoming more marginalized is there, and how we can deal with it. It was reassuring to see India continues to be an outperformer considering its level of development. And but still, I think there is no room for complacency. We need to run faster to stay where we were, and I hope we can continue to provide some kind of inspiration to other developing countries as well. So they also run faster than the normal speed and catch up rather than being left behind further. And finally, you could close on four very important issues for global and regional cooperation in disclosure norms. I think they can be very important for bringing greater transparency, the infrastructure, how we can build it at national and regional levels. You gave the example of CERN, but there is another example of global cooperation in innovation which hit my mind, which was the consultative group on international agriculture research, which provided a lot of innovative technologies to developing countries to catch up in their green revolutions, including India. And finally, the open innovation and capacity building kind of collaborations and some global, sort of norms for open innovation and all that will be critical going forward. So, with that, let me turn to our three panelists. And as I said in the beginning, I'm so pleased that we got some of the best or most knowledgeable experts on the team. And to begin with, Dr. Uma Rani, she is, as you said earlier, also contributed to the report, but she has been leading work at ILO for many years on IT and new technologies, including this AI and all that, and have been constantly reaching out to her to get her expertise and insights into some of our discussions. So I'm very happy that Uma is with us today. So over to you, Uma. And she would like to focus on the AI supply chains, and which Jackie alluded to, how they are getting so much concentrated. So that would be very interesting to take this discussion forward on AI supply chains with Uma. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nagesh, for having me as part of this discussion. And also, thanks to Jackie and his colleagues for inviting me to actually contribute to the report, which I very much enjoyed. In addition to the impacts of AI on labor, the contribution that we made from the ILO was with regard to the AI life cycle and the human labor that is involved in it. Listening to the presentation and also your opening remarks, Nagesh, I just thought I would move a bit and then get into the AI supply chains. I wanted to look at the point that you very firmly made on AI leading to too many losses of jobs, especially within the Indian market, especially with the top IT companies in India, and how do we protect our interests? I think it's not just the numbers, but it's also probably a need to look at the content of work. What is the work that many of these computer scientists or engineers are doing within these companies? And I'll come to that in a minute. I also thought that probably it's time for us to dig a bit more deeper into the definition of what constitutes knowledge intensive sectors and who constitutes it and what is the task that is done as part of that. Because I think the way we had come up with this idea of knowledge intensive sectors was initially, I guess, in the 1990s. I don't know how much of rethinking that has gone into it and how much of transformation that has gone into it. It has been probably a lot of high-end knowledge-based services that were being outsourced to the rest of the world or done in collaboration with them for many of the applications that were coming. And probably, though these companies still provide those knowledge intensive services, a part of it is not probably necessarily true. And there is a need to rethink about that. And I think this would open up a real good debate then to say, what is it that is really happening within these firms per se itself? So I think that's something that wanted to flag. And one of the reasons I thought of flagging is also because we've been doing quite a bit of work in Nigeria, Uganda, Kenya, and India. And some of the top countries that came in the list that Jackie presented was Nigeria. And having worked in Nigeria, I'm very well aware that when outsourcing work comes to Nigeria, Kenya, or Uganda, the top software programming is not necessarily done in these countries. They are outsourced to India. And what gets done is low-end outsourcing, a low-end servicing task per se. And this is something systematically we have been recording in the work that we have been doing. Now, I think it was very good to hear about the positive impacts of ChatGPT in a way. And before I jump into even that, I just wanted to make one more point on AI. I think a lot of work that we also supplied to the report on the AI impacts, I just want to flag one thing. They're AI exposures. And by AI exposures, I really want to make it clear that these are theoretical values. This is an expectation that this might happen. And it reminds me of the last decade's Frey Osborne study on automation, when they would say that, 40% of the jobs would go away. 12 years down the line, we're still there. Nothing has moved. Because what you're doing is you're using expert level interviews to come up with any kind of an analysis. Again, these exposures have come up with some thoughts around using data of patents, or sometimes I also know my own colleagues have used ChatGPT to arrive at some of it, which has raised questions. So I think you need to be very clear. For me, if we really want to understand AI impacts on work, you really need to look at it industry by industry, sector by sector, to understand. And then at the country level, it differs because we still play around with capital labor. And unless and until labor is going to be super costly, you're not going to replace with capital. And this is we are seeing even within the automobile industry between Germany, Argentina, and Malaysia, where Malaysia does not introduce automation because there's no need for it. Migrant labor is available for them, and they have the kind of skills to go about it. So I think I still want that. It might be an old frame, but that frame is very important for us to keep in mind. Now, coming from that to the positive impacts of ChatGPT, it's really good to see that how it does help. I want researchers to do more work around this area to really understand what if ChatGPT is really being used. Because, when you hear software developers as an example of ChatGPT being used, what ChatGPT has done is basically brought in GitHub within it. And GitHub, which is an earlier module of 2.5 decades old, was already having stack of programming there. And computer programmers would always go to the GitHub, get the mainframes and the foundation, and they would build up on it. So what is it that it's done? And I think early last month, I think it was around the 9th or the 11th, there was an article that came out, I think in the New York Times, which said AI slowed down some experienced software developers. And very clearly, the findings from the study that was presented there was that it's not conclusive that AI or ChatGPT actually helps them. Because if there are so many, and unless and until you're an expertise in an area, you cannot rely on ChatGPT. And I think this is something we need to really again understand and see at what levels is ChatGPT actually helping. Is it at the mundane levels? Is it at middle levels? Or is it high levels? What is often not talked about, and this is not just about ChatGPT, but any of the AI products or services, is the AI development per se. And that's where the whole issue of the life cycle of the AI comes in. So, if you're talking about the chat GPT, you have different phases. You have the language modeling phase, you have the supervised fine-tuning phase, which is also called as the SFT model, and you have the reinforcement learning of the human technology. Now, in each of these phases, you have humans actually going about developing, doing human annotation and developing and cleaning data so that that could be fed into the chat GPT and moved around. And you can then pre-train these large language learning models. And this requires often a lot of prompts. So there's a lot of talk about hallucination when you talk about ChatGPT. I was doing a presentation at Leeds University in June, and 3 PhD students after the presentation, because I talked about this entire prompting and providing questions and responses by the data annotators, where, for any given kind of a question, you have a multiple answers that you get, and you keep thinking that these multiple answers ChatGPT is providing itself is actually human induced. Not only that, ChatGPT actually on some of its platforms asks workers. It's very difficult to get an account on these platforms. Once you get it, what you are supposed to do is come up with innovative questions and responses that are not available anywhere on the web. And you are paid based on the ingenuity and the newness of the whole thing. And this is done by PhD scholars. This is not done by any low-level skill services, but this does not come into the face at all. Similarly, we talk about AI medical diagnostic services, and I think this is something I'm very happy that the STI report really goes into it and provides this because we had provided the data, but I just thought it's important to flag it because even when you talk about medical AI diagnostic tools, you do have a lot of training data that needs translation, transcriptions. And in medical systems, you require professionally trained workers to label and tag images from videos and other images that are there and bound them. And such tasks are time consuming. Can you guess how much an hour of video footage consumes the time of experts? It's about 800 hours of human annotation. Similarly, when you talk about autonomous cars doesn't happen. Tesla cannot go about saying, oh, well, it's amazing, it recognizes all the objects that are there. There's human annotation that goes on, 3D, 2D. And this is done by actually scientists, that is computer scientists, as well as engineers. And in the interviews that we've been doing in India and Kenya, and especially in India, the way these people are hired, they are hired that they'll become data analysts. They get into the job, and the entire interview is done with computer science as the core part of it. And you get into the job, there's nothing to do with data analysis. It has to do with annotation. So this also begs the question of misinformation through which workers are being recruited. And I think it's also got to do with the issue around whether the company needs to have its own status quo, right? And how do you go about it? And that's one of the reasons why I feel that the whole question of knowledge intensive services or how you define knowledge services needs to be actually looked at. And the final point I do want to make is on the AI apps that was talked about. And I think both Jackie and you, Nagesh, did allude to it. I want to say that these AI apps are not new. This is part of the citizen science project, which dates back to the 1970s. And one of the first projects that was there was the monarch butterfly tagging project, where they were trying to tag all kinds of butterflies that were there. And the idea was to see whether these species are have an existential crisis or are being extinct, or what kind of measures that need to be taken. And much of this is still in an experimental stage. There's lots of those projects that are there. And even within the scene of agriculture, India has done a lot with regard to developing a number of apps for climate and for weather conditions and for soil and all of it. So probably what we need to do is probably try to think about how do you pull together some of this data within the economy and try to see what stage they are and how to make that outreach much more there. And I just want to conclude by saying that whatever policy we think about for AI in India, let's have the human centered focus and think about all these workers who are engaged in the development of AI, and AI doesn't come out of a vacuum or in the air. Thanks so much.
Uma, I think you brought such a clarity on this employment impacts of AI, and I think it's very clear from your insights that there are positive impacts, there are negative impacts, and so a lot of discussion needs to be on what kind of skills we invest in for building and not be affected so much from adverse impacts, adverse employment impacts of AI. So we'll carry the discussion forward. Now on my list is Professor Rajat Kathuria, who is Dean of Humanities and Social Sciences at Shiv Nadar University. And that makes it interesting because Shiv Nadar, as you know, is one of our top tech entrepreneurs. He founded this big software company, HCL, which is one of the top three companies in India, the vanguard of India's software capability. And so Shiv Nadar also founded this university at which Rajat is occupying a very important position, driving the social sciences and humanities discipline at the university. But he himself had been into this IT and AI and all kinds of issues related to them as a researcher and a kind of analyst and public thinker. And earlier he headed ICREA. So I am very happy that he is on board today, and he will talk about the implications of AI as a general purpose technology for countries like India, and to what extent it could serve as a multiplier, and other economic and social implications of AI for India and other developing countries. So over to you, Raja.
Thank you, Nagesh. Thank you so much for that very warm introduction. And I'm so happy to be here because this, as you said, is an area of my deep interest for a long, long time. And I really liked what Uma ended with talking about the human-centered policy design that we need to do, and absolutely spot on. And I think this is learning from, I think, several other technological disruptions that have happened. And if you were to call globalization as a technological disruption, and globalization was to a large extent the result of technology and the ability to communicate rapidly between countries. And after the initial phase of globalization, everybody started talking about human-centric globalization. And I think it's very important to talk about human-centric AI as well. And since you talked about the university, let me spend a little bit of time talking about what kind of implications it is having for us at the university. And then I'll talk a little bit about the multiplier effects and the policy regime. But, AI has been around for a long time. Uma referred to this, Jackie referred to this. AI has been around for a long time, but as Kenneth Rogoff's book said during the financial crisis, this time is different. And really, it seems this time is different for AI. For this technology. And the reason is, and I'll appeal to, never before has a conversation happened around a disappearance of a university. People have begun to talk about that. I'm being extreme, but what I'm saying is that there is discussion on now the future of the university. And never before have we ever, seen this conversation happen. And the reason why this conversation is happening, at least beginning to happen, is because the certification that a university gives, the communities that this university helps to build, the networks, the learning, all can happen through AI. You can build communities around AI, you can learn from AI, you can create clubs on AI, and therefore, why should I pay huge amounts of money going to an Ivy League university just to get the certification, if that's what a university gives? I'm being simplistic, but AI is having an impact there. And therefore, this time, I think it's different. And of course, the scientific progress, the algorithms, the hardware that Jackie spoke about, even the storage, which is so important, all this is at a scale which is unprecedented and therefore makes it very, very different. So AI of 2020 and beyond versus the AI of the 1950s is very, very different. And therefore, I think this is pivotal at this time. This is very different. And, given that it is so different, I think it's, as you said, Nagesh, let me try and compare this with the kind of impact that other GPTs had on economies across the world. And I'd like to make one comparison. I'll not spend too much time on this, but one comparison is between developing and developed countries, because this is the frame also that Jackie used in his presentation. When we saw the emergence of particularly internet and mobile technology, what we experienced was that the impacts on developing countries in terms of GDP were very, very large. But the same impact in terms of GDP on developed countries was not so large. And the reason was fairly simple, and the World Bank, etc., had talked about the impacts of GPTs like technology. And the reason was quite simple, is that mobile and internet technologies built on the existence of a network that already existed in developed countries, i.e., the fixed line infrastructure, the communications infrastructure already existed there, let's say in Europe, in the United States. And countries like India and Kenya, where there was almost no fixed line infrastructure worth the name. For example, in 1994 or 1995 in India, the penetration of fixed lines was only 1%, or 24 million fixed lines for the huge population that we had. And today, imagine we have 1+ billion phones, mobile phones, and that's what it has done. And therefore, what this technology, what the mobile technology did in countries like India was the GDP impacts were enormous. That's the multiplier effects. And if you look at that learning, that mobile technologies had significantly disproportionate impacts on countries like India, and you say, well, what would AI do then? And I would like to appeal to what both Jackie and Uma said. There is no study that has been done yet for AI impact on developing countries like India. And one of the reasons is time series data that enable such impact estimation does not exist. So one will have to rely on case studies to do that. But my hypothesis is that, and this is sort of not just pulling it out of a hat, I think Uma has already, and Jackie have already said this, which is that, the impacts of AI, because of the initial conditions in developed markets, the exposure and the augmentation, those impacts on especially on jobs, is likely to be much more. I mean, there are aging populations, the demand is much more, the exposure is much more. I mean, there may be some augmentation. I'm not really talking about augmentation. Of course, there will be augmentation, but the exposure as well to AI is much larger. So I think mobile technologies had a significantly lower impact on developed countries, but I think AI is going to have a significantly more impact on developed countries because of the initial condition, because the demand for AI is much more. And therefore, it's likely. And therefore, in India, I think, and countries like India, the impact of AI, well, it will be there. I mean, there will be efficiency enhancement. There will be, I mean, this is a hypothesis, and most likely to be manifested in case studies. As I said, time series data yet does not. And then how do you proxy AI, etc.? Those are challenges. But even on the face of it, we can say that the AI impact on developing economies, while it will be there, it won't be as high because the demand, for example, robotization in the automobile industry, if you look at that data, and if that is any proxy, you would say that, well, there is robotization in the automobile industry, but it's much, much lower in India compared to the West. And, those sort of examples. And of course, also the fact that, companies might find it cheaper to employ people because we are labor abundant countries. So it may be still cheaper to employ people rather than go with capital deepening or capital embracing technological changes within the company. So exactly what Uma was also saying, and Jackie was referring to, that's what policy should do. The other thing, and this is work that I did last year along with a colleague, Akash Dev, who's currently in NCAER. He was a PhD student of Shiv Nadar University, and both of us wrote a paper for the Institute of Human Development, IHD, and it's been published in that journal. And basically that looked at the job content or the task content of jobs in India across primary, secondary, and service sectors. So primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors. And we found something very interesting. While you said, Nagesh, that there was there was in the West, there is a hollowing out in the labor market. We don't see that in India. There's no hollowing out of the labor market, despite the World Bank saying that, and Frey and Osborne that Uma referred to, saying that 78% jobs of India are at risk. It's not that 78% jobs were lost. 78% jobs were at risk. But what happened? I don't think we lost those kind, or the order of magnitude of the job loss is not there. But we find something very interesting in the Indian data, and we use CMIE data. And the interesting thing that we found is that while we don't see the loss of jobs even in the sort of routine manufacturing sort of tasks or jobs that we see in the West losing employment, what we see is an upgradation of the sort of human capital embedded in the jobs, which means that what tasks were being done earlier by lower qualified people or people with lower degrees and lower certificates, is the same job is done by people who are more qualified. So even though we don't know whether it is necessary or not, so what has happened in at least our data showing that the certification or the qualifications have increased at all levels of people who are employed. So where you were hiring a class 12 graduate, you're now probably hiring a bachelor's degree person, and so on and so forth, if you get the point. So that's what we've seen in India, and not the kind of alarmist projections that were made by various agencies. And something that is interesting is that AI is going to have huge impacts. Remember, just a few years ago, WDR, ADB, UNCTAD, OECD, and so many other institutions came out with their annual publications, which were focused on what is called the future of jobs. And today, UNCTAD has come out with this AI report, and I'm told that World Bank is also working. The next WDR is also on AI. So I think there seems to be some clustering. I mean, and which is sort of absolutely, to be expected because of the importance of AI across different economies. And I will make just a couple of more points, Nagesh, and which is that I think the implications of AI for developing economies like India, through what we've seen through DPI, etc., all of that, they're going to lead to, efficiency impacts. But I think for countries like India, the worry is twofold. One is because we are not market makers in the sense, we are not creating the technology. We are getting the technology, as Jackie said. So there's a lot of technological dominance by the West, both in the hardware and to an extent in the software. So I think, concentration is something that is a worry, not only for India, but concentration both in hardware and software is a worry. And therefore, Competition Commission of India has its work cut out on how to, manage this transition. Because, United States and, the technology companies in the United States will try and continue their dominance. And of course, with dominance comes abuse of their power, and it could manifest itself in various ways. So India has to be aware of what are the kinds of, whether it is related to data, whether it is related to technology, whether it's related to pricing, predation, having access to hordes of data, which I think companies, Amazon, Google already have that huge amounts of data. So those are issues that are of worry in countries like India. The second issue that is of worry, of course, is the huge divide that AI threatens to create. And Jackie referred to this. As we are already seeing that the kind of progress that will happen, even the study that I referred to is, skill biased change is going to happen. So even this earlier job is requiring more skills because they are simply available, and AI will also make it biased towards higher skills, and therefore those are the kind of people that will get employed. And Uma referred to this really well, which is that, to make use of I'm concluding, to make use of ChatGPT, you need to be skilled to be able to use ChatGPT. And I think, therefore, investment in skills that you can use AI is absolutely essential. And of course, I know that Niti Aayog is doing this, but AI education in schools, computer science education in schools, etc., all of that, not only in colleges, but in school, it has to start very, very early. That's what we need to do. And one final point, which is of great worry to me, Nagesh, and I don't know if it's a worry to people in the West. It's a worry to the extent that I'm in a university, and out of 10,000 applications that we see for our university, I mean, more than 50% are from students who want to do computer science. And and I believe that is happening across the board, not only here, but all the IITs, everywhere, demand for computer science. And there could be it reflects what happened, in India a few years ago. Everybody wanted to do an MBA. Of course, parents in India have never got over the fixation of medicine and engineering, but MBA had begun to happen 2 decades ago. Now it seems to be computer science, and there's going to be a glut of computer scientists, and there are not going to be as many jobs that are available to employ these people gainfully. Anyway, that's my peeve or a worry that I'm seeing happen. But thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Yeah.
Rajat, I think you have continued to bring greater clarity on this debate about job losses. I think your thoughts are very reassuring that it's not the loss of jobs per se, but different kind of jobs that will be demanded in future. And so we need to re-engineer our educational system to deliver to that. I mean, a youthful country like India, if it invests in right kind of skills that will be needed, perhaps we may end up as a beneficiary rather than losers in this, sort of new technology. And I think there was a McKinsey study I read some time back that also alluded to this, that in net terms, there may not be many losses of jobs, but different kind of jobs. So we need to prepare ourselves for those kind of jobs that will be needed. And so very interesting, very insightful as usual. Now let me turn to Professor Sunil Mani. Sunil, as you know, has been director of Center for Development Studies, now a distinguished fellow. And previously, he worked at United Nations University UNCTAD in Maastricht, which is now called UNU Merit, where I also was there for 5 years in the 1990s, in the beginning of that institute. And Sunil has been working on high-tech industries and services for a long time. So I'm sure he is someone who will, make us much more sort of aware of what is going on. And he decided to focus on the last part of Jackie's presentation, which is on international cooperation. So what Jackie has presented, perhaps Sunil will take us through and bring his insights, because that is a very critical issue, and every one of us believes that we need to do more in terms of international cooperation to make sure that AI is not limited to a few countries and a few people and few companies, but more broadly shared and more inclusive. So over to you, Sunil.
Okay. First of all, I wish to thank the Institute and especially Nagesh and Bina for inviting me. And as Nagesh said, I'm going to focus on the last concluding part of Jackie's presentation, which is also the 5th chapter of the Technology and Innovation Report on international collaboration. So the way which I'm going to do that is as follows. I will first take up each of the 4 proposals which Jackie has made in his presentation. And then I will look at each of those proposals in terms of its supposed its expected aim and the positive aspects of that specific proposal. And then I look at some of the cons of that proposal, and then I come out with some alternative proposals which can actually correct for some of the difficulties in the UNCTAD's 4 proposals for enhancing international collaboration in AI research and development. And I see this in the context of 2 other reports, which have also been published quite recently, which is not cited, of course, in the UNCTAD report. Perhaps it came up afterwards. One is the Stanford University's, yearly index reports on AI. And then the second one is the Australian Strategic Policy Institute's critical technology reports, which have also been looking at the AI research quite recently. And so first, let me look at the reason as to why one should be talking about AI global collaboration. And I must say that there are some isolated efforts at international collaboration. For instance, there is this GPAI. I mean, I think it's pronounced GPAI. It's written GPAI, which is the Global Partnership on AI, which they have now joined up with the OECD. So we are talking about some 44 countries which are actually trying to, to collaborate with each other in terms of both the research on AI as well as its usage. And so first is, it goes without saying that you are doing, because the first chapter of the UNCTAD report talks about the landscape of AI, which as he has very clearly presented, Jackie has very clearly presented the very highly concentrated nature of AI production and of course its use as well. So that's going to have widening inequalities. And so without cooperation, this could deepen the already divides that already exist in various other formats. Already we have a digital divide, and now we are going to compound that with a much more AI divide also. And so the collaboration would ensure that developing nations are not left behind. Only a very few developing nations are actually, and again, if you look at the AI policies, you said a large number of countries don't have any policies at all for AI and so on. The second one is, of course, the leverage collective expertise, because joint R&D and policy frameworks avoid duplication, because this is a very costly technology which involves very data intensive, and data centers are very energy intensive. And so if you have everyone trying to do exactly the same thing, then that will lead to a fair amount of duplication and waste of resources. And especially when you are talking about this against the context of energy deficiency and climate change and so on. So accelerated, aligned with the call for multilateral solutions, which UNCTAD makes to AI governance, makes a lot of sense in that context. Then, of course, the next one is to mitigate cross-border risk, because collaborative strands are vital to address AI's global challenges. In terms of, and all the speakers have talked about labor disruption. And, of course, the evidence, there is some evidence to show that there is labor augmentation, but this is very, very limited. And even labor disruption, we need, of course, as Umarani has said, more detailed granular data, etc., to say that. And of course, security threats itself. I'm referring to increasing cyber threats which are actually happening. Then, of course, lastly, to unlock the SDG opportunities. And in fact, if you remember, Jackie referring to various SDGs, which the report is actually addressing itself to. Climate action is one, healthcare and education the other one, but only so that I think is basically the rationale for this. Now, the 4 proposals, just to go over what Jackie has said and what which is in the report. First is accountability in AI governance. So what I'm going to do is I will take up each of these 4 proposals for enhancing international collaboration in AI. Then what I will do is I will look at vertically in each of those proposals, what are the negative aspects of the proposals, and then I will also look at the horizontally. All the 4 proposals suffer from certain weaknesses, which I will sort of identify. So let's start with the first one of enhancing accountability in AI governance. Now, the positive aspects is that it introduces public disclosure mechanisms because there will be algorithmic transparency, and there will be impact assessments and so on to reduce bias and misuse, which people have been talking about for quite some time. And the purpose of enforcement tools, for instance, it proposes enforcement tools like penalties, deployment restrictions, and so on to ensure liability of actors. Now, what are the negative aspects of these two proposals? The first one is impractical enforcement. There is currently no global entity which is capable of enforcing penalties, in AI research and harmonizing standards across sovereign states. For example, the divergent regulations between the US, EU, and China. They're completely at various. I picked up these three because at least US and China are very much in the forefront of AI research. They are usually ranked number 1 and number 2. Okay. EU is not that much on top, but as a collective, it is very much there as well. So there is very impractical enforcement. There is no global entity. And we have seen now even international governance rules with respect to trade have been, in recent changes in the tariff policies by the current administration of the US. Even international governance rules with respect to trade has not been, it's not possible to enforce them. So that's, I think, so accountability remains largely theoretical. It is not in practical terms. And again, I must emphasize that as Jackie has very clearly laid out in the report and also in the other reports, that most of the work in AI is done by private sector companies, the big tech companies and so on. So what is the kind of enforcement that you are talking about? So that brings us to the next, corporate resistance. The technology firms are likely to resist mandatory transparency measures because that protect their proprietary interests. Now, let me just give one example of this. When we had COVID-19, there was this vaccine development. India and South Africa went to the WTO and said there has to be a waiver for, patent for intellectual property rights for vaccines. And some sort of a TRIPS vaccine waiver came about in 2022, but research clearly shows that the result of that is totally ambiguous. It has not led to large-scale, capability building in vaccines anywhere, And so that's this corporate resistance needs to be taken into account. And we have seen that even, pre-AI, various kinds of restrictive trade practices by the tech giants, even big countries like the European Union has not been able to enforce those. So corporate resistance, one cannot dismiss this at all from the discussions at all. Then the last point is about lack of clarity. The proposed framework fails to identify key participants such as who will evaluate the systems and does not clarify how transparency should apply to inherently opaque models like neural networks, which are completely opaque. So how will you, have this accountability in AI governance in such opaque? So the vagueness makes the objectives very, very difficult to implement. So that's my first criticism of the first proposal. Now let's take the second one, which is sharing digital public infrastructure. Okay. Now the positive aspects, as Jackie very clearly said, it is democratized access to public computing and cloud infrastructure, because you require a fair amount of both physical and soft infrastructure for doing research on AI. High performance computing is one. Cloud, having access to the cloud is another one, and so on. Now, so that's why the UNCTAD recommends a CERN for AI, because in particle physics, we have seen that CERN has worked very well in, and it is, apart from the member countries, a very large number of countries and scientists are involved in the research by CERN. So can't we have something similar to CERN in AI? Okay. But but challenging hardware monopolies, as he said, in GPUs, you have NVIDIA, and in advanced semiconductors, you have TSMC. And if you have look at cloud platform owners, You have Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. All three completely, dominate this area. So this approach promotes public-private partnerships for scalable and affordable deployment. So it's a good proposal from that point of view. Now, the negative aspects of this: who is going to fund this? The proposal lacks visible funding architecture, making large-scale DPI rollout in Global South unlikely. Now, who is going to fund high-performance computing in various countries? Even basic computing is difficult. Now, if you look at some kind of, even in India, for instance, in the rural areas, computer literacy, for instance, is very limited. Some recent research have actually shown that. So underfunded mechanism, it's going to be remaining underfunded. An exclusion of informal economies, because I put a figure of 60%, it may be much higher. In India, we talk about 90% and so on. Workers lack digital access, meaning DPI wouldn't reach them at all. And it's going to be failing the equity goal as such. And the next is, of course, power asymmetries, because capacity building, from capacity building critique, which I will talk about a little later, risks that DPI design control mechanisms remain with global north entities, not serving local priorities. And many examples of this can be actually also given. So now let's move to the next one, encouraging open AI innovation. Okay. And this is again something which is a very nice proposal, because it promotes open source models and data for fostered innovation in Global South and combat data colonialism. Now let's look at even simple thing like open source software. How much of that has actually devolved or diffused within our economies? And then, of course, if you look at the exploitation, the other thing, the first is exploitation risk. Corporations can exploit open source resources from the Global South to create profitable proprietary products without offering reciprocal benefits. A very good example of this is Meta's development of, Meta is, of course, as you know, the parent of Facebook, of the Llama AI, the large language model. Of course, this has led to a kind of a corporate litigation. Basically, Meta has used data from copyright publications, etc., and so on, and has not. And then, of course, using that data, they have come out with this large language model, which they have, they have taken an intellectual property right over it. Okay, so those exploitation risks are quite real, and will continue. And we have a number of examples of this. Further examples also this can be given. And Meta's development of Llama AI language. If you look at the legal response to that, it's quite ambiguous. In some cases, they have won the argument in their favor, but in many cases they have not won it. Okay. Then access inequality, it results in benefits primarily accruing to digitally connected, often English-speaking elites within the Global South. I would say English-speaking elites in the urban elites, and not even people in the rural areas, rather than the broader population, which contradicts the principle of democratization. So when you say democratization, it must include everyone. When you use the term inclusive development, it must include everyone, and not some elite people here and there. Then security concerns. Open tools can be misused for spreading disinformation. And we are now, unfortunately living in a regime of massive amount of misinformation and disinformation, causing other harms, which undermines responsible innovation. Okay, so that's, I think, is the problem of this open innovation. The last is about developing capacity in the Global South. Okay. Now, of course, it's a very good thing because it prioritizes local knowledge sharing, South-South networks, as Jackie referred to retain talent. And also that will retain talent, because you have high-skilled migration happening on a very big scale, and a lot of these, AI-trained software engineers, for instance, even from India, are actually moving into those, even if they are remaining within the country, they are actually working for those multinational companies, which are actually like Google and Amazon and so on. And the kind of ideas which they develop is, those companies take a intellectual property right over it. We have been talking about this for quite some time. provides practical upskilling via workshops and incubators aligned to regional needs. So it's a good thing that this capacity building thing is talking about. But look at the negative aspects of this. There are relevant gaps. Workshops led by global North institutions. Say, for instance, if MIT is doing this, they often push unsuitable models. One example of this would be from, the GDPR, which is the global, general data protection regulation of the European Union. They imposed that on some Kenyan researchers, and so that doesn't align with local needs or context. So, and we have enormous number of examples of this mismatch between the training institutions which train especially in the north, and then of course I'm not saying that all northern institution training is bad or not suitable, but I'm saying is that by and large this happens. Then limited impact. Short-term training seldom established. Now you go for a three-month training program and then come back here long-term, and that is not going to be sustainable to long-term R&D ecosystems, because we have had many training programs, which has been going on. For instance, even when you didn't have globalization, India had a lot of training program under the Colombo Plan. Now let's look at when these people have come back. How have they developed, local technological capabilities in various sectors? One should look at, and AI is much more complex. And then a short-term training program is not going to be very helpful. Then power asymmetries. Agendas are often driven by dollar interests such as climate AI, which can overshadow local priorities like employment needs and divert resources from what is important in the community. Okay, and you have many examples of this and so on. Then so those are the vertical criticisms that I have about these 4 seemingly good proposals. Now, what are the horizontal criticisms which can apply to all 4 of them? First is, I would call it naive universalism. It assumes that achieving global collaboration consensus is possible, even in the face of geopolitical divides, such as those between the US now and EU. And is there a collaboration between any of the, even those rich countries, for instance, even between, say, US, Canada, and Japan, US and EU? It's only through threats and so on, some collaboration is now getting forged, okay? And China on the other. Then underfunded mechanisms, no viable funding architecture is available. And, a global AI tax or something of that sort is perhaps not very practical, And that voluntarism fallacy relies on corporate goodwill in partnerships and open innovation, ignoring profit motives. And we have only seen the strengthening of intellectual property rights over time, despite the emergence of open innovation and, all kinds of other proposals for, sharing and so on. So this voluntarism is basically a fallacy, and we must not give too much importance to that at all. And exclusion of informal economies, because if you say that most of these southern countries are dominated by the informal economies who lack digital access to benefit from proposed capacity building, etc., and so on, and then these 4 proposals needs to be fine-tuned essentially to take care of this. So I place instead of these another 4 proposals. I just put 4 proposals because you have 4 proposals, so I just put 4 proposals. Yeah. First is enforceable standards, not voluntary agreements, and replace dialogue with UN-enforced minimum standards such as data sovereignty clauses in trade agreements. Now, what are these? Just okay. No, so the foreign, so you have to have a binding and not voluntary guidelines. For instance, the current voluntary guidelines allowed Meta to bypass EU data rules in Africa, and you have voluntary guidelines, but Meta has been using those data from Africa and so on. And UN treaty with sanctions like tech embargoes could prevent this, but must avoid becoming another tool for powerful states. And then WTO's vaccine waiver struggle shows how hard enforcement is. I already referred to this earlier itself. Second is empower global institutions from the global south to lead capacity building initiatives. And for want of time, I'm not going to the details of that. I have details there as well. Then impose some kind of a digital extraction fees on tech giants to finance the digital public. So this, instead of a tax, when you extract data from the global south, impose a digital extraction fees for funding the public infrastructure, and utilize AI to assist the informal economy, such as employing voice-based tools. And I just give one example from India. I'm sorry. Yeah. Say, for instance, India's voice-based agriculture advisory system, which is called DHENU, DHENU 1.0 and 2, it has succeeded by co-designing that with illiterate farmers. That means, for farmers who cannot read, they can use this voice kind of thing. Now, finally, so summing up, the UNCTAD proposals are very progressive, because the other reports that I mentioned never proposes any AI collaboration, any collaboration. So from that point of view, UNCTAD has gone ahead and placed these at least 4 proposals on the table. So they are very progressive, but they are undermined by the voluntarist idealism and the neglect of power asymmetries. And power asymmetries we have seen. We are now living in an age where power asymmetries are very is playing out in a very clear fashion. So effective collaboration requires redistributing authority, not just resources but to the global south itself. So thank you. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Sunil. You have really, added so much value to this discussion by taking up the proposals of UNCTAD, which you agree were very timely, that somebody comes up with the proposals for global cooperation. We all agree that this is such a breathtaking kind of technological evolution, needs to be regulated to make sure that it is more inclusive than if it is left unchecked and voluntary and all that. And so you brought a sense of realism, that how much of these proposals can be really implemented and enforced in the absence of a global entity, the funding flows, and whether this open AI kind of innovation will lead to the English-speaking elite dominating it and others being left behind. So these are real concerns, and we need to think aloud. But I'm very happy that UNCTAD has at least started this discussion by putting these proposals on the table. And now one can think aloud, as you have done, Sunil, what can be the alternate options. And I'm sure all of us, when we start to put our heads together, we can come up with some more realistic, more enforceable, more practical solutions. But the need of the hour is to devise something of a global, regulatory body, and how and what shape it takes is something which is a work in progress. So with that, I think we have heard all of our speakers for this afternoon, and I'm looking at the watch. We exceeded the time by 20 minutes already, but I didn't want to stop anybody, because this was really, sort of music to my ears, and I'm sure to all our audience, members of our audience. And I would be, very concerned if we were to close it at this time. We should have some discussion. So I want to seek your permission to extend this by 10, 15 more minutes and have some discussion at least. And then I want to also ask any of the panelists to respond to any of the questions or issues raised. So let me see who from our audience. I want to just open it up, and so who wants to bring some questions? There are some discussion going on in the chat box, but who wants to raise the hand and pose a comment, clarification, question to any of our four speakers of this afternoon? Anyone? So I think everything has been so clear. Keshav,
May I just
Keshav,
say
Ananya.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, it's just I just wanted the views of the speakers. I mean, this entire AI revolution, if I may say so, has really put the focus back on access to education. So I just wanted their views on that. I mean, could we actually use AI for increasing access to education, especially school education? And maybe improving the quality of school education, because I really think that becomes absolutely crucial for inclusive access to AI. So I just wanted the speakers' views on that.
Okay. Let us select a few more points and then I will turn to the speakers. So Keshav, you want to come in?
Yeah, so extremely useful and very informative discussion, and I'm particularly sort of impressed by both Uma and Sunil Mani's points. Actually, that more Sunil Mani than Uma in some sense, because I thought knowing Mani for decades, I think he has really been extremely forthright and very interesting points. And in that spirit only, I just have two little questions, actually more to myself than, I don't know that I can ask it like that. So one is this whole question about how representative is the large database on which much of the AI bases, meaning how representative in the sense like from where these are collected, or like so on which basis you have these algorithms. So the database representation, whether it also carries information from the informal sector, as Sunil Mani mentioned. So that is one little question. The other thing is a little bit about ChatGPT, because I also know of some very interesting study going on in Virginia Tech University. So they are in fact questioning the ability of ChatGPT to replace knowledge or to enhance knowledge. So maybe it is more sort of like establishing a kind of a mediocrity in knowledge, rather than ChatGPT actually sort of like thinks better than you. And the third little related point is that, and these are again paid for. I mean, I can access ChatGPT, but then if you have money, you get the advanced version of it actually. So are we addressing those issues or not? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Keshav. I see a point made by Professor Indra Hirve. She says, considering the fact that 20% of our population is illiterate in India, I would like to know what is the minimum education needed to access AI. So very important point. Any other comments, questions, clarifications from the speakers before I turn them to the speakers of this today? Chidambaram, you
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a comment?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
See, very interesting, presentation by all. I have, if you look at AI, there's this paper by A. Smoglu where he talks about socio-technologies and highly productive technologies. Now, the problem is with the socio-technologies, which actually increase displacement of labor, whereas the highly productive technologies actually are much more beneficial. So in that sense, being the heterogeneity of nations being considered, shouldn't we have at least a organization like UNCTAD shouldn't at least come up with what it thinks a set of what are the socio-technologies under AI and what are the quote-unquote highly productive technologies, a basket which will vary across countries, at least, probably, I don't know if it's there in the report, but at least for what is this set for low developing countries or poor countries or developed countries. So probably if that kind of a mapping starts, then probably I think it will be much more useful. I'm not sure it's already available, but I thought it will allow us to measure things much more in a better way. That's what I personally felt.
Okay, good. Thank you, Chidambaram. Rijesh, you want to? Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about this inclusive AI that you are talking about, and how should we actually provide some benchmark, to measure this inclusive AI? How can it be measured in terms of like whether we can have some metrics or some measures so that we can develop and analyze whether the AI adoption is actually truly inclusive across, say, regions or across income groups and all. That would be very helpful. And in terms of global South, if you say the adoption of AI, I would like to know like which sector would benefit more from the adoption, especially in the global South, especially in terms of productivity growth. If you adopt AI, which sectors would be much more helpful?
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. And I do not see any more hands. So let me turn to our panel members. So in the same order that they spoke. So I think 1 minute each for making closing remarks or addressing to some of the issues raised. So Jackie, you have the floor, and then I'll go in the same order of our speakers.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the very constructive and insightful comments and suggestions. And to begin with, I would just like to say that there has been a very significant digital divide even before AI. So the report is not about how we can fix this existing digital divide, but how we should ensure that the AI will not make this divide even more serious. So for many of the existing issues like the access to electricity or internet, those are things that we still need to work on even without AI. And those are fundamental issues we have not covered in the report. But what we want to highlight is the additional potential issue that AI may present to especially developing countries. That's why we emphasize on the garbage in, garbage out issue, because the AI model is as good as the data is. So we need to ensure we have quality data. And in response to one of the questions about how good the existing model is, I think those are rather biased to the existing data, especially in English language. And with the local situation like Swahili or some Hindu or other specific use case, they are very limited because of the lack of quality data. So this is one perspective of the AI divide that I mentioned. And I would like to thank you, Suni, for the very constructive discussion on the proposal. And I look forward to having further discussion with you on how to really implement this proposal. But in a quick response, I think in terms of capacity building, what I want to highlight is the South-South collaboration, because they face similar challenges and they can co-create a solution that can address these solutions issues. So that won't be a global North enforced kind of model, but some solution or model that global South can really work on together. And one last final comment is the accountability framework, because I understand voluntary mechanism won't work, and also, and if we do it in a mandatory way by government, it won't have the buy-in from the private sector. That's why we try to have a middle ground of having this ESG experience, because that is so far the only successful experience that we have that get the buy-in from the private sector and gradually develop from a voluntary approach to a mandatory approach with more commitment from different stakeholders. So I think that would be a good reference for us to further develop the accountability framework and also other things that we mentioned in the report. And I thank you again for this very insightful and productive discussion. And I will pass the floor to Uma for further
Thank you, Jackie. So Uma, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nagesh. And I just want to say, I respond to two questions that were raised by Keshav largely. And I'm also very glad that Sunil picked on the policy thing, because that's not the prerogative of us, being a sister organization, to comment on another sister organization's policy thing, because we do work together and our idea is to see how we can improve collaboration. So Sunil, your thoughts are really helpful, because this is something we are struggling with the GPAI, where ILO is also involved, and so is UN and other bodies. And we all know that it's not easy to come up with a kind of a global, a kind of a global instrument that could be helpful, given also that multinational companies are leading the way and it's also being maneuvered by that. So I think we really need to think about all of it. And what you pointed out on the GDPR is something we struggle at various levels. It's not just with the AI, but it is also with platforms and other areas of work we do. Now, Keshav asked this question on ChatGPT, and I see he's not around, but I just want to respond because that might be of interest to everyone. We do know that what ChatGPT has is all the information that is basically fed into it. So what it can do is basically collate that information and provide to you. It can think a little bit more, but the minute you stop feeding into the ChatGPT, nothing more will come out, and it's mediocrity. And what we have seen from some of the experiments we are doing is, if you are a novice, you have no knowledge about the subject, you go in and try finding out, it surely gets you a lot of that information and you think, oh my, this is super interesting, you can use it. But if you're an expert and you go and look for it, you know immediately that this is incorrect. And we also know there's been a lot of hallucinations, and how some of the author's information is used completely incorrectly when they try to put together a text. So very clearly, this is not something, I do know that academics have started to use it, but this is not something we should be going towards and using it at the moment. It might help somebody to translate from one language to another or improve the quality of writing for a mail, but I think that's why I keep asking this question. How is ChatGPT being used? Where is it being used? How does it really help? Before we jump into the conclusion of an outcome saying ChatGPT helps in productivity. Really? Let's rethink about it. I want to answer quickly Richesh's question about inclusive AI benchmarks. I don't want to get into the benchmarks, but what I want to emphasize is that AI is a very broad term, and AI encompasses a lot of things. And you can think of AI as part of an automated processes. In many of the case studies we are doing across sectors in different parts of the world, we do find AI, that is the automated processes, very helpful for maintenance and repair of machinery. It gives you, reduces the lag time there, because you can have preventive mechanisms. So I think what we need to think about is think about what are the use cases of AI? Where is it actually helpful? How is it helpful? How does it actually augment the workers' knowledge as well as the productivity in the process? So probably those are things that I don't feel they're done in bits and pieces here and there, but this has to be systematically done, is what I would say. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for this very good
Yeah.
conversation.
Raja, you have the floor.
Thanks, Nagesh. I really want to reinforce what Jackie has just said. He said it in his presentation, but he's articulated it again and reinforced it now. And I think it's worth sort of mulling over that, especially when we look at the policy implications of this beast, AI. And what he said was that there are existing sort of divides, and that AI is not something that, as a technology, it could enhance or decrease, but we don't know. So AI is not responsible for having created, those divides have existed, whether it's within countries, whether it's between countries, whether it's between regions. So those divides have existed. And my experience with working in the policy space, I mean, only limited to India, is that when a new technology comes about, or whenever, when the mobile happened, there was a lot of euphoria, and they say, "Oh, this is the panacea. This is the solution. This is the silver bullet. Now it's going to, change everything, and it's going to, enable us to achieve our objectives, aims, and dreams, etc." And none of that has happened. And I suspect that none of that is going to happen with AI. It, of course, depends on how we use it. So I think that's really important to carry forward, and that we should have a realistic and practical way that we're going to deal with AI. The other learning, I think, that we know, and as Uma is saying, we need to do a lot more work. And AI throws up things that experts would deny, and that to people who are not trained or not experts, they will think that this is great and this has changed the way we function, etc. So I think we have to keep that in mind, and that really is what economists say. It's reinforcing the biases, skill biases that are inherent. And I think, so how do you begin to address that? That's a large question. I mean, there is learnings, and how do you use AI to, widen the scope of the delivery of education? Can it do it? Of course, it can do it. When mobile phones came, we thought, oh, we get rid of the classroom, and mobile phones will be able to deliver. Now, mobiles and computers and internet has been able to reinforce but not replace the classroom. And I think having a physical school, etc., completely exactly opposite of what I started this conversation with, the demise of the university. I don't think that university is going to die, but I think that's the conversation that is happening. And so I think AI can enhance, but there have to be schools. I mean, Abhijit Banerjee says there have to be schools with teachers and cameras and local language skills, so that the outcomes of school. So we have to get those in place first. I think, and then AI can, of course, expand and improve the quality of what we deliver. But unless you have the infrastructure in place, both the physical and the soft infrastructure in place, AI will not be able to. It's not the silver bullet that will then help you solve all your problems. And I think we should keep that squarely in focus.
Thank you, Rajat. So Sunil, last word, the final word.
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't want to spend any further time on this, but I just want to respond to just two questions. One is by Ananya, in whether AI can increase access to education. Theoretically, it can, to the same extent that if you say tele-education can increase, include the excluded. In a similar vein, it can be done. But as has been said by many of the speakers, when you have so many other divides, and when those things are not sorted, mere AI by itself cannot increase access to education. It can perhaps improve the quality of education of those who have already got access, and to a certain extent. And second one is about Professor Hirabe's point about whether people who are illiterate, can they take advantage of AI? I think they can. That's why I said about this voice-based systems. Voice-based systems, if you instead of writing a question, ask any question, ChatGPT says, but if you are able to speak, have a system by which you can actually speak to it. But again, there it requires, satisfying many other technological conditions. Only then it can.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much, all four of you. I think I could not have asked for a more engaging discussion on this subject. And we have been on for more than 2 hours, but it was a time very well spent. And I really do not want to summarize what was a very rich discussion. We discussed all different aspects of why this is a technology which can change a lot of things. But there is a fear of domination by some. It is already visible, and high concentration in such a few handful of companies and countries and all that. The need of the hour is to devise ways and means to make it more inclusive. And global cooperation is very much critical and needed, but it's challenging, especially when there are very powerful players in the game, controlling for a huge proportion of the hardware and software. So, and then the hype about AI, what it can do, that also needs to be really made sense of, and developing countries need to invest in skills development to harness the fruits of this. So there are a lot of issues to mull over, and we look forward to remaining in touch with all of you. We are also going to put together, not only the video will be online at SID website, but also a policy brief, and I have assigned this to my colleague Sanjay Malik to prepare a policy brief on the basis of this discussion. So we will be in touch with you, Jackie, and all three of our experts and everybody else. So I want to really thank you for this very rich, very engaging session. And finally, I want to thank my colleague Beena, who, as a coordinator of ISID seminars, put this together and brought us together on this single platform. And we will continue to use this forum. And Uma, I look forward to having you with us when you come to Delhi, and so we'll be in touch about that. Thank you very much once again.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.